So I'm going to talk about Condi Thief and why Condi Thief as it currently functions shouldn't function. And to be clear, this video is not so much about deleting Condi Thief from the game, but is rather more about why Condi Thief should have its mechanics completely reworked so it functions in a completely different manner than it currently does. Because as it currently functions is just bad for the game, because of a very specific mechanical difference between how Condi Thief works and how other Condi builds work. So, on a typical Condi build, there is very specific skills or combos that will be the primary source of their condition damage. So you look at Condi Mirage, they get all of their Condi burst from their shatters. And yeah, they'll have some filler Condis from, weapon skills and whatnot. But their huge Condi bombs that actually kill you come from landing shatters. So if you can avoid those shatters, then you've avoided most of their damage. And, it's the same with Scourge. Scourge gets most of their bursty damage from trapping a foe in their F5. And to make a more classical example, ye old Condi Warrior from the Heart of Thorns era, it gets its Condi burst from landing Skull Grinder. So every Condi build for the most part has very specific skills that are responsible for their burst. So if you can avoid those skills, then you avoid the damage. But with Condi Thief, that's not true. They don't get their damage from specific skills. In fact, if I look at my SD set, which is the typical weapon set of Condi Thief, there's no damaging conditions here, there's no damaging conditions here, there's no damaging conditions here. Oh, we do have one here, but it's just one stack. There's no damaging conditions here, so there's it's not coming from the weapon skill. So where's it coming from? I mean, we have 2 on steel, but that's not a Condi bomb by itself. Well, it comes from this very convoluted system of trait procs. So we have stuff like dagger attacks have a chance to poison enemies. Critically hitting applies weakness. Applying poison also applies weakness. Immobilizing a foe applies poison, and you have a guaranteed chance of applying Immobilize when striking a foe below 50% health. And of course we've also got things that are tied to specific skills, such as stealing applies confusion, and you've also got interrupting a foe applies torment. And then of course, going beyond just traits, we have, vulnerability sigils on hit of inflict vulnerability. So what this means is, rather than its damage coming from a specific set of skills, any strike that the thief lands on you can set off all these procs that set off these damage. So to illustrate this, I'm just going to throw my dagger. 4 conditions just from throwing the dagger, and that's not even the maximum. And I'm getting really bad RNG. Okay, there we go. So there's the max. So I can apply poison. So I've got kind of an average of 4 conditions applied, and I can, if I have good RNG on dagger trading, I can apply 5. And if the foe is below 50% health, then I can apply all that mess, because Panic Strike goes off. So that's just me throwing the dagger out. That's not even a burst skill. And of course, this trait can actually proc off this skill, and this skill. So again, it's just not one specific skill, and the weakness procs off anything, Immobilize or Panic Strike procs off anything. And then I've got Venoms. I've got this Venom here. Poison foes with your next few attacks. That procs off any strike damage I do to the opponent, I can proc a Venom off of. Which means if you're fighting a Condi Thief, if you want to avoid these procs, you literally cannot get hit. Because if they hit you with any strike damage, they start setting these procs off. Which makes it much harder to deal with compared to a traditional Condi build where you fight them by baiting out their burst skills and then evading or blocking them or whatever. Because again, if you have no idea which skills are going to be applying the big bomb, then how are you going to dodge them? Because it's not practical to dodge everything. Your dodges have cooldowns, your blocks have cooldowns, your cleanses have cooldowns, and really you can't cleanse through a Condi build because ANET's been very meticulous about making sure that countering a Condi build is about avoiding the Condi application rather than just trying to power cleanse through everything, which is good. It would be really stupid if you could face tank a Condi build and cleanse everything. That wouldn't be very good, and obviously Condi builds would never be meta if you could do that. But if they're going to insist on this system where countering a condi build is all about anticipating their condi burst and avoiding it, then they need to make sure that all of the condi builds have their burst tied to specific things, rather than, oh, if I touch you, you get condi bombed. And obviously, yes, there is a specific combo for condi thief called pressing 2 and then dodging that applies a huge amount of condi burst, and this is usually what people think of when they think of condi thieves, is that particular combo. But, I mean, even if I fail that combo, I can still set off all those procs I just set off via other means. And really, that combo itself, even just looking at that combo, it's a combo that's very easy to land because it's procced by Infiltrator's Strike, which is instant. So the only way you can dodge Infiltrator's Strike is if the thief presses Infiltrator's Strike while you're already dodging. So basically, if the thief's an idiot, you can dodge it. Obviously, if you do some really good guesswork and manage to press your dodge button like a millisecond before the thief presses theirs, you could dodge that. But that's kind of, you know, that's guesswork. That's trying to anticipate what the thief is thinking, and that's not reliable. Even if you've put tons of hours into the game and put tons of practice into fighting thieves, you're still just guessing when they're going to use that skill. So that's not something that you can realistically dodge. So again, we just have this combo, and of course, you know, the steal's still available. And again, that's a steal. Thief will never miss steal because, again, it's instant, so they can only miss it if they deliberately throw it away. So we've got all these traits that are impossible to predict because they're random, and then we've got this the one damage combo that is specifically tied to skills is instacast. So you can't really anticipate it unless you just guess. And we've got this mess that is Condi Thief that's nearly impossible to fight. And yeah, there's some disadvantages for Condi Thief. They're very squishy and so forth, but realistically, you know, if you can have 100% weakness uptime, which Condi Thief does between this trait and this trait, and then they've got, you know, the 10% damage reduction from this trait on weakened foes, you know, it's gonna be hard to kill them, and they'll kill you before you kill them 90% of the time, unless you gang up on them or happen to be playing a thief yourself. So it's just created this very, very difficult class to counter because, again, there's no way to anticipate anything, and it's just not good for the game. That's all I can really say, is this kind of random untelegraphed trait proc shenanigans just shouldn't exist. And, you know, Thief isn't the only class that's like this. Necro has a good amount of random damage procs, but the problem, particularly with Thief, is the sheer quantity of them and the fact they're all in a very convenient setup. You know, running Trickery, Deadly Arts, Daredevil, they're not making really any sacrifices to run this. Whereas, you know, running, you know, a proc bomb Necro requires ditching Soul Reaping and ditching Blighter's Boon, so, you know, you just threw every single bit of your survivability out the window doing that. Although, really, honestly, even Necro shouldn't have all those random procs for the same reason that Thief shouldn't have those random procs. So, what I would like to see happen is, I would like to see they get rid of these procs, move the Condis onto very specific weapon skills. And also on a few of them, I think they just need to tone down just the variety of conditions being applied. Like Lotus Training. Why does Lotus Training need to be applying 3 different conditions? Why does it need to be applying Cripple, Torment, and Bleeding? Like, at the very least, they should just ditch the Torment and just have it apply 2 stacks of Bleeding. And really, I don't see why they need to have the Cripple on top of that. In fact, really, I think the whole game needs less Cripple in it because we're kind of reaching the point where there's several specs in the game that can apply almost 100% uptime on Cripple, and it's getting kind of ridiculous, but that's another video for another time. You know, why does Dagger, why do we have, you know, Torment at all? Like, even on Dancing Dagger and Pressure Striking. Like, I'm a firm believer that every class in the game should have 2 damaging conditions that they focus on, and they just don't have access to other things. So, like, Thief, you know, it should be Bleeding and Poison. That's their traditional conditions. Necro should be Bleeding and Torment. Guardians, Burning. Ranger should be Bleeding and Poison. Mesmer should be Confusion and Torment. You know, they should have very specific thematically linked conditions, and that's what they focus on. They shouldn't have access to Confusion and Torment on a build that, on a class that already has easy access to Poison and bleeding and weakness and cripple and immobilize, because again, it's just way too much condition variety. And this is actually something ArenaNet has always struggled with. ArenaNet has never done a good job at managing cover conditions. They've been very good at, you know, nerfing damage application of condi builds and builds in general. They're usually, when they do balance, it's by messing with cooldowns or messing with how much damage a skill does. But they've never really put any effort into reducing the variety of conditions being applied by certain builds, and that's really what's hurting them with Condi Thief, because Condi Thief, you know, this has been nerfed. You know, the SD Condi Thief was first introduced in Season 8, and it was nerfed immediately. But now it's back, because they never fixed the root issue of all these random, impossible to anticipate procs that apply a huge variety of conditions. So if they just, you know, fixed it, so, you know, get rid of some of the unnecessary condi types, such as Confusion and Torment, which Thief doesn't really need access to, you know, switch that damage over to Bleeding or Poison, and consolidate it. Maybe cut down on the cripple a little bit, because again, it's just getting a little excessive, just having cripple on all these random things, like Caltrops and Lotus and Dagger, and on top of the Immobilize the class already has, because that's just excessive cover condis. And then, you know, move the damage out of things like Panic Strike into weapon skills. And another thing I'd like to see happen is this sigil. Sigil of Fallibility should not exist. Period. This sigil needs to get removed from the game. And I'm saying this as someone who runs this on all my builds. Because, again, it's a free cover condition that gives you a damage bonus. And you can actually stack a pretty decent amount of vulnerability with this sigil. So, like, for Thief, you know, Thief wouldn't have native vulnerability application in their Condi Burst if it wasn't for the sigil. Because none of their skills natively apply vulnerability, at least during the combo. Obviously, Cloak and Dagger does, but that's not something you're going to use during your primary burst combo. So if they could just fix those things, it'd be great. And honestly, I think moving the damage out of random procs is actually good for Thieves as well. Because, you know, if you're playing Thief and your damage is based on these random procs, that means you don't have total control over it. Obviously, you know, certain combos, such as the 2 into dodge combo, have a very high chance of applying it all, but it's not guaranteed. Like, you know, I can throw my dagger at the dummy and it could apply 5 conditions, or I could throw my dagger and it applies 2 conditions, because Weakening Strikes was on cooldown, I had bad RNG and dagger trading, and my sigil was on cooldown, so I only got 2 conditions out of throwing it, or I could just throw it and I get 10 conditions. Or 5 conditions, sorry. So again, you know, it'd be better for Thieves if they had specific skills that were responsible for their damage, so they weren't dependent on this RNG shenanigans and ICDs that you can't see for their damage. This would, so really, and of course, as I've already mentioned, it would also make it a little more interactive for their opponent, instead of a, well, you need to avoid every single attack the Thief does if you want to avoid their procs. So that kind of sums up my thoughts on Condi Thief, and I just wanted to put this video out there because there's an insane amount of Condi Thieves floating around ranked right now. Pretty much every Thief I've seen in ranked this season is running Condi, and I'm getting very frustrated with it.